back to normalizing men's mental health. I have the privilege to be able to speak to Brad Jameson, former medic with the 375th from 2001 to 2006. He is the CEO of Valor in the Valley, based out of Belgrade, Montana. I was put in touch with him by a former colleague of mine that does for suicide prevention. I had the privilege of actually speaking to Brad the other day, and we have similar goals of bringing awareness to mental health, not just only with veterans, with men, with people, and just really want to help out individuals. How you doing, Brad?
I'm good. Good, Will. How are you this morning?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. So, why'd you start up the Valor in the Valley?
Valor in the Valley was the culmination of me and my best friend, who is from New Jersey. He worked in philanthropy charities, doing stuff for police, fire, children, and I was in Kentucky doing things in veterans charities. And both of us were kind of dissatisfied with the way certain things were done, and we kind of wanted to do our own thing. And Montana was a dream of both of ours, so we started coming out here around 2020. And by 2023, we started up our charity and got all moved out here and started doing a charity that and running it the way we felt should be run. And our main goal is giving veterans purpose in life again. And not only by giving them purpose, we want to give them opportunity, help them with benefit, getting connected to benefits, and then giving them, once we give them purpose again, keep that purpose alive through mental health care, external support, peer support, make sure they go to the doctor, and just mind their overall well-being. Not just in my experience with a lot of charities, they seem to have a come in the door policy. They help you real quick and then out the door, and there's no further help afterwards. And we wanted to be different. We wanted to be someone people could keep coming back to if they needed help, or keep coming back to us for help with anything they needed. And that's how we started in 23. And 3 years later, we're still running strong.
Well, we'll start off with the conversation of your childhood.
Uh, my childhood and what I why I like to talk about childhood trauma, and from what I've noticed over my 10 years of being in mental health care and being a suicide counselor, is childhood trauma plays a lot in mental health care. Um, from dozens of veterans that I've spoken to that have been able to go and down to Mexico and try ibogaine. And ibogaine is a powerful psychedelic that veterans have been trying to take to fix TBIs, PTSD, and a lot of them noticed that on this ride, I guess you could say that it wasn't the military trauma or the military PTSD or the things they thought were causing their PTSD and all their mental health problems. It was childhood related trauma, things they hadn't processed from their childhood. Um, in the 6 years that I was in, I served with a lot of veterans in Ranger Battalion who were just like me. I grew up. I started out in the Navy. My dad was a Navy. He did his. He retired out of the Navy in '92, and in 1992 we went from being in the Navy, a good a good lifestyle, upper middle class, and my dad decided that he wanted to retire and be a farmer. And he decided to go back to his home in Kentucky, where we moved to. And I went from being in the Navy, going all over the world. I lived in Georgia, South Carolina. When he retired, we were living in Italy, and then we went to Kentucky, where there was nothing, and I had lost all my friends. And at that time, I was about 10 years old, and I really didn't know how to process it. where we went to, it was one of the small towns. Everybody grew up together. Everybody knew each other, and I was an outsider. So um, I ended up acting out in a lot in different ways. So bad that I was an alcoholic by the time I was 16 years old. Uh, I would get alcohol in any form, shape I could, and my problems got so bad that my parents actually took me to court over the way that I acted. And the first crossroad I ever remember in my life was when I was standing in court, looking at a judge, and he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Jameson, if I send you home to your parents, are you going to behave?" And I looked at the judge and I told him no. So the judge decided that since I couldn't behave, he put me in foster care. And I spent from the time I was 16 till I was actually 18 and a half in the foster care system of Kentucky. And I can tell you from the traumas that I dealt with, I have my entire life feels like everyone I've ever, known, trusted, or was supposed to trust abandoned me, tossed me aside, or used me however they could, got what they wanted, and tossed me. So I had severe trust issues. Um, I suicidal ideations were a big part of my teenage childhood, and by the time I got out of foster care when I was 18 and a half, it was in the it was in 2001 or no 2000, roughly around there, when I was released and to be an adult. Uh, all I did was went right back to where I was and went wild. Uh, got into drugs and doing anything I could because I had no purpose. You know, I didn't care. And to most people, um, 9/11 2001 was a very traumatic event, but that was the second crossroad for me. Um, I I remember waking up that morning. I had fallen asleep on the floor of the place I was staying in, passed out from alcohol, nowhere good. And I remember my girlfriend at the time waking me up and showing me the TV, and seeing that on TV that day changed my life. Um, it made me realize that once upon a time when I was a child, I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be in the military with the rest of my family, and so I watched what happened over the next week or so. And by September 20th, I went and signed up for the U.S. Army to join. I wanted to do my part, and honestly, back then, to everyone, it was the patriotic thing to do, fight for your country. But on on the inside, all I cared about back then was that this looks like a good opportunity for me to make something out of my life. And if I go over there and I die, I did something with my life, and I died a hero for my country. That was the attitude I went in the military with, and I didn't care if I died. You know, I thought my life might mean something if I died for my country. So I went into the military with mental health problems, as it was, and I brought that baggage with me. So that childhood trauma was all unprocessed, and then I joined the military, and then I took on another set of baggage and trauma. So when I talk about the childhood trauma and how it deals with men's mental health, it's not just the things we deal with as an adult that we have to face. It's the traumas that we face as a childhood where we were weak, we couldn't do anything about it, and it's that stuff that we have to learn to let go.
It's just really really hard to let go when there's a lot of rejection in your life. There is the abandonment, the foster care is a whole other beast where a lot of people don't really understand the trenches of the abuse that happens inside that system. They don't really typically understand the statistics of people aging out of foster care, what's the likelihood of them becoming homeless or in prison, the sexual abuse that happens to both boys and girls inside
I,
foster
I,
care.
I had the displeasure of seeing it all. In my 2.5 years in the foster care system, I was never sexually abused, thankfully, but I've moved between 5 different houses in 2.5 years. My senior year in high school, I went to 4 different high schools. I graduated high school with people that I went to school with for 30 days. I didn't know any of them. And so like I said, it just became somewhat normal to me to just be passed around as needed. A lot of foster care system homes are just about getting money. But I say that about that. But the last home I ended up at, um, the my foster dad at that home was in a wheelchair. His name was Dwayne, and he was a big change in my life and a big inspiration for why I joined the army and decided to go a different way. I just didn't know it at the time. When he was 18, he was trying to impress a girl and went diving in a shallow pond and broke his neck. And when after I had left the fourth foster home for getting in trouble for a bunch of stuff, when I got to talk to him, and he was like the first real disabled person I'd ever dealt with, and he had a big long conversation with me about the path that I was on and what consequences were, and seeing him paralyzed from the neck down just because he was trying to impress a girl, it really struck me, and it kind of changed my life in that way. So, in the foster care system, there are some good foster care parents, but like you said, it is riddled with trauma, abuse, and a whole lot of baggage.
So, why did you decide to become a medic in the army of all occupations?
That's a funny story because, like I told you, I joined the army because I wanted to go die a hero for my country. And when I joined, when I went to the army recruiter, they make you take the ASVAB test where they decide how smart you are and where they're going to put you. And I took it, and I told them when I went in, I want to be in 11 Bravo. I want to go to the front lines. And I took the test and came back the next day, and they're like, no, you can't be an 11 Bravo. They said you scored high enough on this, you can be in nuclear medicine, you can be an X-ray tech, or you can be a combat medic. And I said, will get me closer to the infantry. And they said a combat medic. And I said, I'll have to think about it. So I went home actually for a couple of days and thought about it, got online, looked it up, figured out what it was all going to be about. And back then, so many people were joining up. It was like you didn't have a choice. So I decided, one way or another, I was joining. So I took them up on their offer, and they sent me to originally just to be a regular combat medic. I went to basic, and then I shipped to San Antonio, Texas, where I got my EMTB. And my first orders when I finished school was to go to Fort Hood, Texas, where that's where the cavalry is, where all the tanks are, and that did not appeal to me at all. And the recruiters from Ranger Battalion came to San Antonio, and where they came and they said, anyone interested, come see us. And I went to that meeting, and like, we'll send you to airborne school, we'll send you to special operations medic school, make you a paramedic, we'll send you to the ranger school, and then we'll send you over there with the best equipment and all this. And I raised my hand, and that's how I got to Ranger Battalion and became a Ranger medic. Uh, the Probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life was passing that school. Uh, it's That's one of the things that my childhood and every all the trauma that I dealt with, I was always, it always felt like I wasn't good enough or I couldn't do it, and that gave me an attitude of like I can do anything if I put my mind to it. So I looked for the hardest things, the hardest paths. And Ranger Battalion is one of the hardest units in the U.S. Army to stay in. They have zero tolerance policy. If you mess up, you're gone. It's one of those places. So they take the best of the best. It's hard to stay there, and I enjoyed the challenge. And being a medic and working for those guys was probably one of the most rewarding things ever, while also one of the most traumatizing.
Why did you want to die overseas?
Like I said, in I grew up in a military family. My mom's side of my family was all in the Air Force. My dad's side was a lot in the Navy. I come from a military background, and at the around like I said, the time by the time I was 19 when I joined, I didn't have any goals in life. I didn't know how to be an adult. The foster care system didn't prepare you for that. I was homeless. I was homeless. I had a girlfriend, and we kind of just lived wherever we could, stayed with friends, and I had no goals. I really didn't care if I lived or died. I was doing drugs and alcohol back then, like I didn't care if I lived or died. And like I said, at the time when 9/11 came around, I thought, I know it's dark to think, but it seemed like a good way. What better way? If I didn't care if I lived, why not go die for my country?
So
At least someone would remember me that way. That was my way of thinking back then.
it makes sense. It does make sense, and quite a few of us have felt the same thing that you're speaking of. And I've heard that type of perspective many times over in my life. You enjoyed the army. Why did you get out?
I really, I was, when I got in, my goal was to die for my country. But as I progressed, I found brotherhood. I found people that actually cared for me. The greatest compliment I ever got in my life was after my first deployment to Afghanistan. When we got back, a couple of my guys were standing in a circle, and one of them said, "I wanted to thank you, Doc." And I said, "Wait, what for?" Because he hadn't been hurt. I hadn't worked on him, and he says, "You know, the crazy things we do. The only reason I'm able to do them is because I know you were at the back, and I know that if I got hurt, you would get me home." And you know, give me a second. It was things like that that changed my life, and I realized that I did have a purpose. I did have a meaning, and I loved what I was doing, so I intended to stay. And I did an deployment in Iraq where I re-enlisted in Iraq. General Stanley McChrystal actually re-enlisted me, and then by the third deployment, um, I went to the third deployment in Afghanistan. I had been with my platoon for the first two deployments, and then on the third one, a medic in one of the other platoons was in Ranger School, and they needed a cover. So I had to cover for another platoon, and I ended up with a platoon of guys. I knew them, but I didn't know them like I knew my guys. And we were in a different country. My other platoon was in Iraq, and I was in Afghanistan, and we ran into a we used to we were in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and that is some of the roughest country I've ever seen in the world. And we were out doing night ops, driving with binos or with nods, and we were going around a mountain pass. And instead of going left, the lead driver went right, and two Humvees followed, and they went off into a river. And we lost two of them. Couldn't save them. The other guys that we could save, I was taken care of, and those that was the first time I really like lost two guys, and there was nothing I could do. So it really hurt me as much as it hurt the two guys that survived it. And then a week later, the same guys that my platoon that was in Iraq, they were doing an op, and basically the enemy knew they were coming in and dropped some grenades off the roof on top of them as they stacked to go in, and basically blew up a bunch of my friends. Um, on top of losing those guys, getting those news that a bunch of my other friends were severely injured, um, and then I had my own problems going on. I was having girlfriend issues, a whole lot of things just piled up. And Doc being Doc, I I had to be strong, and I made the worst mistake is I never reached out for help, and I never talked to anyone about it. I compartmentalized it. You know, I didn't want to be perceived as weak because I knew what those my guys were counting on me. And in 2000, late 2005, I was in my aid station. It was late at night, and I I had access to all kinds of meds, and I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore. I couldn't deal with what was going on. It was way too much to process, and like I said, dying for my country, dying overseas, I wasn't in the right state of mind. So I decided that I couldn't deal with all these voices going on in my head anymore, and I was going to end it. And I took a needle full of ketamine because we had ketamine over there because that's what we used to practice um, in the goat labs where we practiced medicine, special ops meds. So we had access to ketamine. I pulled a whole vial, 10 mil of full straight ketamine, and I was going to go out with a bang. And I was sitting at the door. I put that needle in my vein, and I was crying. And right as I went to push, and understand, this was like at 2 in the morning. Our cook, of all people, just so happened to be out in the middle of the night and decided to come by the aid station because he had a cough or something. And when he opened the door, he instantly saw me and he's like, "Doc, what the hell are you doing?" And I started to push, and he grabbed my hand, and I got enough in to knock me out, but not to kill me. And I'd never expected to wake up from that. And let me tell you, when you do something like that and you wake up, it's very, very, very mind opening. And I don't really speak about it a lot. I haven't spoken to a lot of people who have survived it or talked to them about it. But in what it did to me was gave me a new appreciation for life. And but I still had a lot of trauma still attached with it that was still unresolved. But the only thing I could think of was it was fate that that cook walked in and saved my life, and it wasn't my time. So after I woke up from that, I had decided in my mind, I'm supposed to be here. I need to figure out why. And that didn't come quick. It didn't come easy. Um, Back then in 2006, PTSD was kind of a still unknown to the VA, or they didn't know how to treat it, or didn't even want to acknowledge that it even existed. And uh, that happened in September, and by the end of December, I was out of the army. Basically unfit to serve because of they called it a personality disorder back then. Uh, I was kicked out of the army uh, because of the way that I tried to commit suicide because I used drugs. That's what I was basically Article 50 or Article 15 for, was over that. And then I was deemed unfit, and they basically gave me my DD 214 and sent me on my way with no benefits. Uh, it was a psychological discharge. So I lost my dream of being in the army. I failed to commit suicide, and now I was once again homeless, kicked out by the military, jobless, and at the time when I got out of the army, I was in Georgia. I was in Columbus, Georgia. I was still with my girlfriend at the time, and I moved to Atlanta, and uh, I was working on my VA case. I filed my VA case before I had gotten out, even though they had told me I hadn't wasn't eligible for benefits, and somehow I don't know how it managed to get through. And uh, I did their exams, and 6 months later it came back and they said that I was 70% disabled, 50 for PTSD, and they gave me all my benefits back, uh, my education benefits and everything. Basically, the army had kicked me out over using drugs to kill myself, but in fact, I was riddled with PTSD, depression, anxiety, dealing with all kinds of traumas that I'd never talked about, and the VA thankfully recognized that and said that, you know, he needs help. So I got into the system and was able to get help that way.
This is a question I ask people when they talk about suicide. What did you want to accomplish by dying by suicide?
It's like I said earlier, like I felt so abandoned or tossed aside and forgotten in my life that, I felt militarily dying for my country because every day I remember my brothers and sisters that we lost overseas. You never forget their names, and that to me, as twisted as it sounds, seems like, if I die for my country, at least someone will remember my name.
Yeah, I still remember my buddy's face. Actually, a couple buddies I lost, and it's something that you don't always forget. You said something that really struck a chord with me when I almost took my life the last time, and waking up on the barrel of a shotgun. It gave myself a chance to live instead of actually just surviving.
And that's exactly it. Um, I realized that I'm not a real religious person, but I knew some divine intervention. I don't know what it to call it, but I knew it wasn't my time. I had a purpose there. Someone was telling me it wasn't time to go. And unfortunately, I didn't figure that out quick. It took me years and years of therapy, actually 10. I spent 10 years in therapy and dealing with pain. In the course of the military, that's one thing I didn't mention. The part of this whole mental trauma thing is I had severely hurt my back at some point in Afghanistan. I don't know how I did it, what I did, but I severely tweaked my back and I was struggling. And that was another thing I was hiding, that I was hurt because, like I said, I was a replacement there as it was, and I knew that we didn't have any medics to replace me. So there was another thing. I didn't want to be perceived as weak, and that notion there, being perceived as weak, harmed me more than anything else in my life. I destroyed my back. I destroyed my mental health and everything, trying to prove that I was some I was someone. And instead of focusing on the right things, I was focusing on all the wrong things. And in those 10 years, I've had five back surgeries, fused in three levels in my lower back, and the pain that I got from the sciatic nerve where I damaged it went all the way down my leg. I could not feel the bottom of my feet, and I spent half of my time just trying to focus on how bad it or trying to hide how bad it hurt. And um, pain drove a lot of my mental health, and I was able to, after finally getting a couple surgeries done, um, The VA had me on, unfortunately, had me on opiates and pain medications, managing it, and I was invited to the VA. There was a doctor there doing her dissertation, and I was her dissertation. And I went and saw this doctor. I saw her 3 days a week for about an hour, hour and a half, 3 days a week for almost 3 months. And I, I finally opened the door and talked. And that was the hardest part, was just to talk about all my trauma, how everything that had happened to me, and I got it all out. And this doctor told me, based on everything you've been through in life, your medical background, and all this, you need to find a purpose. You need a purpose in life, and I've heard that before, but it had never really sunk in until I heard it from her and after talking with her. But she set me on the path that led me to where I am. It was with her. I remember it being a hardware and a software issue. Um, the body is hardwired for nature to be in the sun, to be outside, to be one with the earth, that kind of thing. And the software was society, computers, jobs, and all this. It's like you can't live your entire life worried about the software if you never fix or take care of the hardware. So taking care of being wired to and setting schedules, um, making normalcy in your life so your brain can have ease, I guess say. That's what we learned in the military. When you're the healthiest in your life, you have a schedule. You eat normal. You eat good food. You exercise. You get outside. You do things. You have a purpose. And then when vets get out, they they don't have that stability in their life anymore. There's no one telling them they got to be here at a certain time. They don't have their brothers around them anymore, policing them up or taking care of them. You got to be an adult. You're on your own. You got to manage it yourself, and that that is where a lot of people struggle, especially especially men. You know, sorry if I've been ranting.
No, you. It's. I appreciate the vulnerability and the transparency. And this is a question that I know plagues a lot of people when they're doing therapy. What was the ambivalence of wanting to open up to a therapist or being able to share your truth so you could be witnessed?
It, I think that my holdup was with is, and I noticed that a lot of vets are the same way. Is they don't want to open up to people they can't relate with, and they don't also want to open up to strangers, or because they feel vulnerable, or they're telling things that they feel judged and things like that. And it's hard to explain how I got over that hump, but in 2016, after 10 years of dealing with it, I was just tired of it, tired of suicidal ideation, tired of being on opiates, being on medications, antidepressants. I was just tired of not being me. I lost myself, and I wanted to just. I don't know what normal is, but I wanted to be normal. So I decided to just finally just open the door, and that's the hardest part. I've learned in my 10 years as a veteran service officer, and I had to learn the hard way that you cannot help people that don't want it. And it works in the same as yourself. You cannot get help unless you're willing to open up and receive it.
The
So my opening up to the doctor was me getting to the point that, I have tried everything I can. I have done everything that I can, and I haven't solved this problem. Why not give this a shot?
How did you feel when you finally opened that up?
I cried like a baby. I think I'd had 12 to 15 years of just sadness and grief that I had bottled up, and I literally cried for a long time, and it was probably one of the most emotional releases I ever had, and it's what changed me. It's the bottling up and the holding things in, not processing pain, not processing trauma, not processing grief, not processing abandonment, just bottling up and dealing with it. And people think if they just bottle it up and not think about it, that it goes away, and it doesn't. And I still struggle with it. Uh, since I've gotten out, and I just struggled with it not too long ago. Roughly every 7 years, I go through a major depressive episode. I had one back when in 23 that lasted about 6 months, and my wife is the one that pulled me out of it. It's it's hard to describe depression in words to someone that's never experienced it, but the best way I can describe it is just emptiness. It's pure black emptiness. Like nothing matters. Like nothing. I didn't care. It was. I got to that point. Like I don't care if I live or die anymore, and I couldn't solve it. And my wife is what saved me this last time, and that's one of another life lesson I learned about how having someone stable in your life, family, a spouse, or someone to lean on, because there won't always be a therapist, or you can't always run to the doctor, but you have to have someone in your life that cares for you and that you care about to help pull you out of those dark places.
Hey, Brad,
Yes,
I got
sir.
a question from a veteran. He
Okay.
said, "How do you convince yourself that you deserve help?"
How do you convince yourself that you deserve help? That is a that is a personal thing where, like I did in my life, you control your reality, and your decisions and what you do in life determines your reality. So you have to decide what you want out of this life, whether you want to live your trauma, be your trauma, or whether you want to be yourself or live your dreams. So I guess you say everybody deserves help. It's a matter of wanting it and wanting to receive it. I can
The,
sit here and tell you all of this, but unless you're willing to take the steps and make changes in your life to gain your mental health, to gain purpose in life, and find your happiness, unless you're willing to go for it, it's not going to come to you. No one is going to come and drop a box in your lap and give you everything you want. Everything in this life, as everybody knows, you've got to work for it. And your mental health and your happiness are the same. So it's not a matter of thinking about if you deserve help. Everybody deserves help. And I can tell you, in my 43 years, every time I've gotten a step ahead is because I reached out and I asked for help.
I know him personally. He lives over where I live. I'm not going to say his name just for privacy, but he's more in that dark place. What would you say to yourself, or what do you think that you would need to heard while you're in that dark place, asking for help but not knowing how to accept help during that time of you're sitting in front of a therapist, you're asking for that additional support, but then at the same time, how did you, or what words would you need to have heard to allow yourself to take that next step?
I believe it was the what do you want out of life. It stems down to what do you want out of life, because if you know what you want, you can set goals. And if you can set goals, you have something to strive for. If you have something to strive for, you have something to get out of bed every morning and work for it. And it's the small things. I had to start with the small goals, and the small goals was getting my ass out of bed and taking a shower putting on my clothes and going out into the house and sitting with my family, and not just laying in bed watching TV or staring at the wall feeling empty. It's the small goals. You start with small things. Get up, take a shower. The next day, start another goal. Get out of the house. Start with the small steps. And then I was able to just, by focusing on more about what I needed to do and not where I was or where I had been, I focused more on the future. And then I was able to, I guess, put all that behind me. It's not easy. There's no easy answer for that. There's no quick answer, and I can tell you there's no drug in this world that's going to fill that void, and especially alcohol. I can tell from my extensive experience and my personal experience, there is no benefit to alcohol whatsoever. And the ones that don't make it or lose that battle or stay in that depression are the ones that use alcohol. It's been my experience. It's their go-to because it numbs everything. And so, if I can give the best advice I can give is start out with like I did, get a piece of paper. And back then, my goal was to. I started out small, like I said, started with a shower, but my main goal was to move to Montana. I lived in Kentucky, and that was in, I want to say that was, would have been around 21. No, it was 23. So I had a goal of moving into Kentucky, and it took me 2 years to get that achieved. But that I set a goal to move to Montana, and that was the end goal, and that's what I focused on. And one of the main reasons I'll tell you I moved to Montana, and is one of the big lessons I had to learn the hard way in life. And I can tell this, and I hope everyone hears this. You cannot heal where you were harmed. It does not matter if you were harmed or traumatized or PTSD or experienced PTSD or any sort of situation. I have not found a way that you can heal or get past it when you stay in the same environment, deal with the same people that cause you trauma, or stay in the same situations that make you relive those traumas. You cannot heal where you were harmed. I've been around the world 5 or 6 times. It's a great big world out there, and some people still live where they were born. So if they're experiencing, severe mental health problems, traumas they can't get past, or things they can't get over, set a goal. Move to wherever. Everyone wants to live. I always had a dream of living somewhere when they were a kid. Set a goal. Try. At least it'll give you something to work for. But I wanted to live here all my life, and I set that goal, and I keep continue doing that. I continue setting goals to find my purpose again, and my purpose that I have found is helping people. So I spend my time trying to help others, trying to help them get over the traumas that they've been through, help them over the humps that they're going through, because I've experienced it. And especially in the veterans community with what I had to deal with for fighting 4.5 years with the VA, I learned the whole VA system through that. And now I go out and help veterans fight the VA system so that they don't go through the same things I went through.
Well, Brad, one more question from him, if you don't mind.
Um, no, not a problem.
He said, after I got out of the military to force reduction, I have never felt like I wanted to do anything. I already did what I wanted. I served until I was told I couldn't. And we were just touching about this before about the abandonment and what helped you start to allow yourself to be able to be accepted after you've been severely abandoned from childhood. He had childhood abandonment issues, and then also being able to allow yourself to be accepted and then allowing your amazing wife to accept you.
I'm glad that he actually asked that question because the answer to it is you got to learn to love yourself, and that's the one thing to look that when I look back in my life is that I never learned to love and trust myself. I always relied on external people, external means to dictate how I was supposed to live my life or what I was supposed to do or how I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to act, and I never, focused on me or what I wanted. It was always about, you got to do this, you got to do this. And, as a man, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I never focused on myself. A lot of that therapy that I went through was was learning that I couldn't change my past, and so it's a matter of letting it go, learning that it shapes who we are. It shaped who we are now, but until we can learn to love ourselves, trust ourselves, that brotherhood that we had like in the military, you'll never find it again in the civilian world. There's plenty of charities out here that offer, veterans to come and do, I call them buddy weekends. And in my experience, it's made it worse because you get a taste of being in that brotherhood again, and then it's taken right back away from you. So, learning to love yourself and being proud of what you are and what you can do if you put your mind to it and focusing on self betterment and how you can make a difference not only in your world but the rest is how I guess you could say it. Because I see it as if I help one veteran, I don't charge for what I do, but all I ask them to do is to tell another veteran that I help them, and there are other people out there that will help them. It's the small acts of kindness that I feel like instead of making the world a worse place, I'm trying to make it a better one. So where I look for that brotherhood is trying to find those brothers that are lost and help them again.
Well, this is a good transition to pain management, not only mental pain, but physical pain management through psychedelics.
Yes,
But
sir. I when my first back when I actually when I hurt my back in the military, the first time my back went out, I actually blew out my L4 L5 disc from a sneeze, and it caused my spinal process to completely collapse and it completely crushed my left side nerve root. And I lived in a constant state of, on a scale of 1 to 10, about a 7 to 8. Um, I tried all kinds of legal drugs, illegal drugs. The VA had me on opiates for years. All they ever did was make me not care. They didn't fix the pain. Um, when marijuana was one that I had found that had the least amount of side effects, that relieved the back spasms that I had. Because muscle tension and muscle pain were a lot of the problems I had in my back, and marijuana has been a very good help on relieving that and also helping me sleep. But when I finally got up to Montana, uh, being I was willing to try anything, and I was able to get into a program that allowed me to get on low dose MDMA therapy, and this therapy was like 0.25 milligrams for 30 days. And I actually didn't go into the program looking for any kind of pain management. I was going into it to discover on my own self discovery journey if it would help with, recurring depression, anxiety, and problems like that. And with mental health, it's just the small steps. And uh, I was sitting at my kitchen table talking to my a bunch of my friends that I went to basic and AIT that I still talk to, medic buddies, and my buddy Dan was like, "Hey, how's your pain?" And this was day 13, almost halfway through, and I hadn't even thought about the pain because I had been, working through childhood traumas, talking it all out. They say the best thing to do when doing these psychedelic therapies is to talk it out. So I stood up and I started moving around, and I realized that I could feel the bottom of my foot again. Like I had sensation in it again, and it completely blew my mind. And I noticed I continued the MDMA therapy. I did the complete 30 days, and I will, for the rest of my life, swear by MDMA and its ability to heal neuropathy pain. The sciatic knot that I had near my surgical site disappeared. The knot in my ass disappeared, and instead of not being able to feel my foot at all, I have sensation and numbness and tingling in it again. And my pain levels went from living at a 8 to 7 down to more like a 3 to 4. It gave me my life back, and I that's when I started noticing. And this was earlier this year, and when all that pain disappeared, or I won't say disappeared, when all that pain level went way down like that, it gave me so much more of like my mental capacity, my brain capacity to think, because I wasn't so focused on being in so much pain anymore. And all my life, especially since the pain that I've been dealing with, especially this physical pain, I think physical pain drives a lot of mental pain. Guys who suffer through a lot of physical pain, me personally, when I'm in pain, I get pissed off. It makes me mad, and when I'm hurting, it puts me in a bad mood. And when I get in a bad mood, I start thinking about things that I probably shouldn't be thinking about, and it's a downward spiral. So I have discovered, since being able to find some relief from this pain, that it's a whole lot easier to push past the mental issues, the mental thinking about things all the time, and think more about where I want to be in my life or where I want to go in my life, not where I've been.
Well, this is actually leads into another thing that you want to talk about: the overuse of medical language and
Yeah.
the simplification of having that conversation about your needs.
So I being with my medical background and everything I've noticed that a lot of, you know, it's social media, online, the news, everywhere we go. It's, you know, especially the VA, and they love to push medications and stuff, but they like to use big words and medical names like depression and anxiety. You know, you're clinically diagnosed with depression, and it sounds like a burden. It's like putting a big chain around your neck, like you have depression, and here you have to wear this, when I think people should more focus less on the language and what comes with it. And instead of, I'm depressed, it's I'm sad. Being sad is more manageable than I am clinically depressed and diagnosed by a doctor. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be nervous with anxiety. I think people need to learn to manage expectations and manage, you know, how they are and what the language of it, instead of focusing on depression, which feels like this giant mountain you have to cross. I got to see all kinds of doctors. I may need medication. I may need this. I'm just sad. How can I fix this? Start out small, set goals, and figure out your own ways that make you happy. I've told several of my guys that the one things in your life when it comes to coming to your mental health care is, and I'll be as blunt as possible, you don't owe anybody shit. The only person you owe in this world is you. And if you can't learn to love yourself and take care of yourself, how can you expect to be there or be better for everybody else? I've told several of my veterans who like deal with childhood trauma, especially with like parent trauma, you don't owe your parents, you don't owe your siblings, you don't owe your friends, you don't owe them anything. you owe yourself. Focus on fixing yourself, and if you can get there, then then you can help them. But the people in your life, even if it's your parents or your family or all of them, if all they do is reoccurringly bring you trauma or cause you mental anguish or just bring drama into your life, get rid of them. It's I hate to say it, but I don't talk to a lot of my family anymore that caused me a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I've been better for it. You shape your reality, and the people that you let in your life, you allow them to shape your reality. So if these people in your life are causing you mental anguish or holding you down, because trust me, there are a lot of people out there that live in misery and they don't want to see people happy because they want to see people miserable like them. Those type of people will keep you that way.
Well, the other question I got for you off of my script is how do you call for help when you need it? And how is actually asking for help really just supporting yourself in a way of allowing people to see you?
Asking for help is really the easiest thing to do in the world. It's just it's a matter of pride. Um, but in men's lives, especially in mine, my dad, you know, taught me it's a tough world. You got to be there for yourself. No one's coming for you. No one's coming to help. You've got to solve all your own problems, and that's the way society has shaped men and men's responsibilities and all that. When it's all a lie. Everyone I've like I said before, every time I've ever been able to get ahead in life or get an extra step ahead or get insight on something or even my education or I had to ask for help. Someone out there will know something more than me. And every I have learned that I know nothing. And if you can have that kind of attitude in life that you don't know anything and be open to learning about everything, you'll be surprised what you'll find. Asking for help is simply telling someone that I do not know how to solve this problem. Do you? And when veterans come to me and men come to me over their issues on mental health issues, that's what I like to do. I like to solve problems. So I enjoy helping people, and I promise you, there are people out there who enjoy helping people, but you have to ask for help. No one is going to come and give you help because, like I said, and I've learned the hard way, you can't help someone that doesn't want it. So if you're sitting in a point in your life and you don't know where to go, you don't know what you want to do with your life, ask someone for help. It is not weakness to ask for help. It takes strength to ask for help. And only the strongest, I won't say that, it takes the strongest men to admit that they need help.
And we were talking about this before offline about how dying by suicide, completing suicide, or committing suicide, depending on what language you use, it not only transfers your pain over to your family and your loved ones. So, can you help us understand how it is a strength to be able to heal for the people you love, not only for yourself, but your friends and family, and also for your future possibility friends and family?
Yes, I I said that, and when I mention that is when I want people to think about when they're in in their their darkest depths of thinking about taking their lives. It's I had a powerful thing where I was at a rodeo this year, and they brought we had a kid here locally who was about I think he was 14 years old. And he took his own life from bullying, and they rode in this wagon and they called it the empty chair. But when they rode this wagon through the arena, then we had the announcer stand up and would say, everyone who knew him, loved him, was friends with him, can you please stand up? And you look out into this big crowd and you see all these people stand up, and it was one of the more powerful things about suicide that I'd seen, and it just made you think, when you're in those depths, you're thinking about taking your lives, you're transferring all your problems and all your pain and all your trauma. They don't go away when you kill yourself. You just pass them on to the ones that loved you. And to see all those people affected by, just one person, all those people affected by them losing their life, that's something that they'll have to carry with them the rest of their life. It's Suicide is not a way you want to be remembered. It will Your trauma will become everyone who ever loved you. It will become their trauma too. So when you're thinking about that, don't pass your pain on to someone else.
Hey, Brad, I believe we touched everything that you wanted to talk about and more. The question I have is any final thoughts that you would like to share to anybody that is listening, regardless of if they're in the ambivalent phase of opening up to other phases of life? What would you like to share?
We covered pretty much everything I was wanting to share. I want to say to all the men out there that you're not alone, and don't be scared to ask for help. Um, I was I was talking to the guy that referred me to you as a form of help, and he referred me to you. And talking to you, believe it or not, is helping me. Talking about it is how we get over these humps and how we get this out there, that your men aren't alone and you don't have to deal with this yourself. So if I had anything to say or any advice, swallow your pride, quit being scared, and get help. Just everyone in this world has a purpose. Yours is out there, and the longer you're fighting your purpose or fighting being a part of this world, the less good you're doing in it. So if we're all out here doing something good, maybe we're making the world a better place, small steps at a time.
Well, one of the guys, he said, "Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your insights. I believe your story not only is going to impact men, but also people and their families, because you hit on a lot of areas that we don't give the insights to other people to explore some of our mental situations." And Brad, I wanted to also ask you again, where could people reach you?
I can be reached. I have an email. Uh, my name, brad.jameson at vitv.us. That is my email. And especially for our veteran brothers and sisters out there, I, I can help veterans all around the country remotely. And my phone number is 406-517-8166. And if you wanted to speak about something, it's easier if you text me because I can keep up with conversations. Um, but if anybody needs advice, my email and my text are always open, and I'm willing to help anyone needing it.
And then the last one I wanted to hit on was I wanted to go back to the nonprofit that you're doing, Valor in the Valley.
Yes, sir.
What do you exactly do with this again?
Valor in the Valley is we made our it's run off the acronym Valor. We give voice where we listen instead of telling people what to do. We Voice means we listen. I want to hear your problems and hear what you're going through, so that I can get an overall idea of how I can help you. The A in Valor is access. I give access by helping people, connect them with benefits, get them with doctors, to get them health care, medical care, whatever benefits they need, or however I can to help them get medically or mentally stable. Then L stands for livelihood, which is where we build stability by connecting veterans to training programs, vocational schools that we have. Uh, Mainly, we're working right now in fire and fire mitigation in the state of Montana because the West is always on fire. Um, O is for opportunity, which where we create pathways by connecting veterans to their education benefits, or even we work with civilians too. Our main goal here with livelihood and opportunity is taking veterans and hooking them into the system of public service. So veterans who went and served the military can now come here and get used the training that they learned, and we want them to use those skills in the public service sector. Instead of going over and fighting an enemy, now the enemy is fire. We use the same tactics, the same equipment. We get military surplus equipment, and we use these equipment when we go out and we fight fires. And then R is for resilience. We help these guys get through these programs, get their lives stabilized, help them with anything they've got going on. And resilience is keeping them in that state, making sure they still see their doctors. If they're having problems, help them. But our main goal is to help veterans find purpose again in life and use that purpose in the public sector so that therefore they can serve the public again and find purpose in life. The military, you sign that red dotted line, you willing to give your life away to serve your country, those same set of skills do, despite what people say, transfer to the civilian sector. It's just a matter of finding a way. And our goal at Valor in the Valley, me and my partner Kyle, is right now we have a fire mitigation group. Instead of fighting fires, we really want to prevent them. So we're using all of our resources and everything up here to try to help governments let veterans come up here and do fire mitigation work and clean up federal private property to prevent it from burning. So we use our resources to help other veterans around here get connected into the public sector here so that they can again serve and protect resources here.
Well, Brad, say it's a privilege to be able to have this conversation with you. I look forward to staying in contact with you. You're an amazing dude.
I appreciate it, sir. It was definitely very nice to talk to you, and I honestly, if nothing else, I hope one person gets some help out of this.
I think there would be more than one person.
If anyone gets anything out of this, then it was worth it. So, I love what you do, Will, and please keep it up.
Thank you.